Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the A1 from Bambu Labs. Now I've already done my unboxing and initial thoughts video, so today we're going to do a little more of an in-depth review. So I'm going to talk about, just very briefly, price, and then we're going to go into some of the automated features that make this printer kind of special. At that point, after we get those features knocked out of the way, I'll talk about some pros and then some not quite cons, and then I'll get into the cons, and then we'll wrap up by discussing my overall feelings on this printer. So let's get into it. Now, to start off, let's talk about the price and features. So you're looking at $559 if you get the combo, which is the AMS and the Bambu Labs A1 printer. If you don't want the AMS, which is useful for multicolored printing, then you can get just the printer itself for $399, and that will come with this single spool holder. Now, if you do order the AMS, you still get the single spool holder, and that's a pretty big benefit, and I'll talk about that a little later. So now let's take a look at some of the features that make this printer special. First thing we're going to do is to take a look at some of the features of the Bambu Labs A1 printer. So there are several features that we'll be looking at. I just started a print. It's a very simple print here, but we'll cover a number of things that happen when you start a print. The first thing that it does is it goes through its homing procedure, so it has to know where everything is, X, Y, limits, Z as well. Once that is accomplished, it will start to heat the nozzle, and it'll purge out some of the old filament. It does have some very unique features that are part of the fully automatic calibration. One of the things that it does is dynamic flow calibration, and this essentially calculates and controls the material flow through the nozzle as you are printing, and that helps give you a much more accurate and consistent print results. It will use some flow rate information that it calculates through this process. It's very similar to pressure advance or clipper, in clipper, or linear advance in Marlin. And then during the printing process, the printer compensates for extrusion volume based on real-time flow rate information. The next thing that it does is this XY mechanical mode sweep. And what that does is, right now it's doing it on the Y-axis, so the build plate is going back and forth. And you get motor noise from these mechanical vibrations, the motor driving, the fan operations, the extruder movement. That can be kind of disruptive, so it goes ahead and it calculates all these values, and then it can reintroduce them into the motors to help cancel out some of that noise, and that results in a much more pleasant printing experience. Now it's moving on to the tool head cleaning process. So you will see this happens in 2 steps. After the print job is initiated, the cleaning is automatically performed. You don't have to do anything for it. First, it will do a fine wipe. The fine wipe is done to clean the nozzle tip to give you a smooth finish, and then the coarse wipe, which you see there on the back rubber, is to clean any residual waste material that's on the hot nozzle. So again, these things all happen automatically every time you start a print, and that just helps ensure that you don't end up with any extra filament on the build plate or a little glob as you start a print that could end up ruining what you're trying to do. Now that the tool head is clean, it'll go ahead and go through the bed leveling process. The bed leveling with the A1, it actually has a sensor in the nozzle or above the nozzle, so it knows when the nozzle actually hits the bed. So at this point, it's doing height mapping, and so by probing the hotbed through nozzle contact, the A1 performs height measurement on 49 points arranged in a 7x7 grid. So that's what you see it doing there. It's going to do 7 in the X and 7 in the Y. And then during printing, it'll do compensation adjustment. So the printer automatically adjusts the height of the Z-axis at different XY coordinates based on the height map. And that ensures that you always have a constant distance between the nozzle and the hotbed. And that helps your adhesion, makes things more uniform, and it improves your print quality. Now, one thing we didn't talk about is the automatic, or not automatic, but it has a belt tensioning monitor. So through that XY motor calibration process, it can detect whether you have loose belts. And if you have a loose belt, it will notify you via the maintenance monitor. Now that our bed leveling is finished, it will finally finish heating the tool head or the nozzle. And right now we have a bed temperature of 64 degrees. The nozzle temperature is increasing there. We are now at 183 degrees. And then it will go through one last step, which is to run 2 lines, which it's doing right now. It's also part of the flow rate compensation. So it's extracting filament onto the heat bed, and you can see it's making that kind of jerky pattern there. Once that has happened, it will start the print. So at this point, it is doing the first layer. Once the first layer is done, you typically will see a speed increase. Now that that first layer is done, it is moving on, and as mentioned before, you will typically increase speeds at this point. The next feature that we'll talk about is automatic filament detection via the AMS unit. Now, this little silver dot here is an RFID tag, and that allows the AMS unit to automatically detect the type of filament that you are putting on the machine if you are using Bambu Labs filament. Now, as you can see on the display, currently AMS unit number 2 is not loaded. All I have to do is put the spool on the machine, run the filament into the bottom of the unit here, and once it hits a point where it's detected, it will automatically start pulling the filament in, running it up through the PTFE tube. And if we look here at the display on the machine, it is now showing that PETG is loaded. Now, if you happen to run out of filament during a print, the printer will give you a warning. It'll let you know that you are out of filament, and you have some directions on the screen, and you can take action to replace the filament. At this point, all you have to do is go to the filament screen, press load, it will heat the nozzle, and the directions will be right there so that you can load new filament and continue your print. Once the nozzle has reached temperature, the printer will direct you to feed filament from the spool holder until the filament sensor is triggered. This is very simple to do. As you can see here, I am just rotating the spool. I am pushing the filament down. You can see as I indicate here, and soon it reaches the sensor in the tool head, and then the screen changes and continues the loading process. Not only does the A1 have a filament runout sensor, but it also has the filament tangle sensor. So here in the AMS hub, there is also a magnet. That magnet is pulled down if there is any kind of a jam in the filament spool. The extruder will pull on the filament, the hub itself will be pulled down, and that will trigger the tangle sensor. You will also get a notification if you have a tangled spool. Most printers that don't have this feature, the extruder will actually just grind away at the filament. It will stop driving it, and the printer will continue to run even though nothing is coming out of the nozzle. So your print will continue, nothing is happening. You come back hours later and find that you have a failed print. The filament tangle sensor will prevent that. The A1 is touted as a high-speed printer. Now you can see here on the product technical specifications page that the max speed of the tool head is 500 millimeters per second with a max acceleration of 10,000 millimeters per second. Now, I will caveat this by saying that you have to have the right filament in order to reach those speeds. If you look at Bambu Labs basic PLA, you can see that the printing speed is less than 300 millimeters per second. If you look at some other filaments, like this filament here from Voxel Lab, you can see that the print speed is listed as 40 to 60 millimeters per second. This all has to do with the formulation, viscosity, etc. of the filament. It has to go from a solid state to a liquid state and then get pushed out of the nozzle. That can only happen at a certain speed. Now we're going to see more and more high-speed filaments as printers increase in speed. Here, this Polysonic PLA is also touted as having high speed from 100 to 300 millimeters per second. Here we have an example of a print that was designed for a high-speed vase mode printing. Now, if you push the printer beyond what the filament is capable of handling, you will end up with errors, as are demonstrated here by the final print. Removing and replacing the nozzle on the A1 is extremely easy. All you have to do is remove the front cover. This simply pops off. There are a few little plastic tabs that hold it in place, as you can see right here and here, those 4 tabs. Once the cover is removed, you'll cut the filament if it's not already cut, then remove the silicone sock that exposes this little metal clip and gate. Open this gate, and then the nozzle itself is magnetically held in place. Simply pop it out. You can see what's left of the filament that was cut there. To replace it with a new nozzle, let's say you wanted to use something different. You can see this is a 0.4 nozzle. If you wanted to put in a larger or smaller nozzle, it's just a matter of reinserting the nozzle. Sometimes it can be just ever so tricky to keep everything out of the way. Nozzle goes back in, close the metal gate, pop back the clip, and then reinstall the silicone sock. Once the sock is done, you do want to make sure that your nozzle tip is poking out of the bottom. Then the front cover snaps back in place. The A1 is a very quiet printer. Here we have it doing its first layer. Typically your first layer is going to be printed slower, so it will be a little more quiet. Right now I'm standing about 4 feet from the printer. I'm going to switch from the microphone that is on my chest to the microphone that is attached to the printer. You can see this small item over here attached to the bucket. This is the microphone. So that gives you an idea just how close we are to the printer. Let me switch the microphone over now. You'll probably hear a change in my voice because now I'm being picked up by the microphone that is right next to the printer. The loudest thing currently on, or that the printer is producing, is actually the cooling fans. So now I will switch back to my microphone. And I will move about 10 feet away from the printer. It's very, very quiet. Now I do actually have two other printers running right now, and I will do a similar test with those. Now here we have my Prusa Mark III. It is currently printing. I waited a little bit so that it would get past the first layer, because the first layer, just like the other printer, was printing at a slower rate. But I'll put the microphone in the vicinity of this printer as well, so you can get an idea of how it sounds. Running right next to my Mark III, I have a Prusa Mini, and I will again put the microphone closer to the Mini. The Mini is a slightly quieter printer than the Mark III, but you can get a similar experience. Let's take a quick look at the Bambu Handy app. From the home screen, you can choose models to print if you would like to do that. I typically will use the slicer on my computer. I can hit devices and it will show my printer right now, what it's printing, how far it is, which layer it's on, and about how much time it's going to take. I can also change controls here. It's showing nozzle temperature, bed temperature, and speed. Now if I hit speed, I can actually choose silent, standard, which is where it's at now, sport, or ludicrous. If I hit ludicrous, you will see that the speed will change to 166%. Now this will obviously have an effect on my print quality, so I'm going to go ahead and change that back down to standard, but those are things that you can do right from the app. The final feature that we'll look at is the camera. If I hit that play button there, it will turn on the camera, and I should get a display. And now you can see that the display is on. I actually had it on running on my computer. That's why it didn't come on initially. I had to shut that one down. Probably can only display at one device at a time. So as you can see, it's not a super high. I don't know if it's 480p, 720p, 1080p. I'll probably look that up and put a little graphic on here. But you can see it's only a few frames, or a frame every few seconds. So it's not like a high definition, real-time, 30 frames per second display. But it'll give you an idea of what's going on. You can check in on a print. You can see if, hey, do I have a spaghetti monster here? Do I have a failed print? Is there something going on? Have I lost bed adhesion, etc.? And then you can always turn that off. Just hit the pause button there. You do have the option here. Let me start that up again. You do have the option to go full screen, I believe. So there you can see a full screen view. If I were to rotate the phone, now I have a full screen view. So if you wanted to set your phone aside to monitor a print as you sit out by the pool and sip your pina colada, that is an option. So in a nutshell, that is the Bambu Handy app. You also have your settings, printing history, support ticket, etc., stuff like that for the maker world. All right, so as you can see, there are quite a lot of features on this printer. Now let's get into the pros for this printer. So number one, I would just have to say is going to be the price. $399 or $549 for the combo is just an exceptional price. $399 for a printer with this number of features, that's just outstanding. Second, it's really easy to use. I won't say there's anything or there's any such thing as a perfect printer. You're still gonna, you may have your challenges here and there. There's a lot of variables that go into 3D printing, but they have really done an outstanding job of just making this a simple printer. It's easy to put together. Most of the time, you're not gonna have any problems when you send a job to the printer, or you use the touchscreen, or you use your Handy app and something to print. Most of the time it's gonna work. Not all the time, but most of the time. The print quality, outstanding. No complaints there. The things that I've printed so far have been just absolutely phenomenal. They are just as good, if not better, than the Prusa printers that I have back there. So no complaints in the print quality. You are going to get near Core XY speed. It's amazing what they've done with a bed slinger here. I don't own, as you can see, I don't have the P1S or the X1C. Or any of the X1 variants, but from what I've seen online, people say that this printer is about 15% slower maybe than those printers, so you're almost getting that same level of speed at a much lower price. So that's definitely a pro. It's quiet. It's a very quiet printer. When this one's running, if it's the only one running, I'm not having any problem sleeping. This is my bedroom, and may not look like it, but I could easily sleep with this printer running. The other two, sometimes they may keep me up at night. Next, no issues with adhesion. So this is the Bambu Labs textured PEI plate. I haven't had any issues whatsoever. Didn't have to scrub it down. It's worked right out of the box. Everything prints very nicely. If you let it cool long enough, it'll pop right off. Otherwise, you simply take it off, give it a little flex, and your parts are going to pop off. So I printed both PLA and PETG, and no issues whatsoever. Now let's talk about some of the not what I like to say, not quite cons. First off, the filament. If you're using the AMS, the printer is going to cut your filament. So this is the cutting mechanism. It runs over here, hits this bar, pushes that in, and it's going to cut your filament, and it's going to do that at the end of every job because it doesn't know if your next job you're going to change your initial color. So it's basically preparing, and what that means is now you've got this chunk of filament in here, and when you start your next job, it's got to run that out, load in the new filament, push what's left in out, purge all that. So there's a little more filament waste if you are using the AMS, even if you only use one spool all the time. Now that's where having this second single spool and the ability to use it without the AMS, and all you have to do is unplug the unit, and then the AMS is no longer detected, and you can print using the single spool. It's pretty quick to change over. It's not terribly complicated, but so just keep that in mind if you are thinking about getting the AMS. The other thing that I call a not quite con is that it's limited to non-enclosed printer filaments. So things like ABS, ASA, PC, PA, nylon, PP, and flexibles, those tend to have some higher constraints, let's say, for a 3D printer. So if you look at some of the Bambu printers like the P1 and the X1 series, the X1 is enclosed. I can't remember if it's P1S or P1P. One of them has the frame and no sides. The other one has the sides. But some of those filaments require a much higher temperature and they're more prone to warping and things like that, so you need to have a more temperature control, no drafts, etc. So although technically being able to go up to 300 degrees Celsius on the hot end and 100 degrees Celsius on the bed, you may technically be able to print those filaments. And if you're doing something small, some of those like ASA or ABS, I think you could print on this. You just have to realize that you're more prone to running into some issues. Now, that's like buying a car and complaining that it can't fly. You know what you're getting if you buy a printer like this. So if you really know that you're going to be printing some of those more exotic filaments, then you probably want to buy an enclosed printer. Finally, let's get into the cons. The AMS Lite, I love it. I've been able to print some really cool things. I didn't, I bought it because I thought I may want to do color here and there every once in a while. I did this first print. This is a little accessory tray for all of the things that come in the box. It's really cool to be able to do something like this, to have a different colored text on there. Quite happy with the ability to do that. But as you can see, there's just no easy way to keep filament dry on the AMS Lite. If you look at the X1, the X1, P1, the AMS system on those, all of your filament is enclosed in a box. You can put in desiccant in that box. People have figured out, various ways to keep their filament dry with those printers. You're not going to be able to do the same thing with the AMS Lite. Now, I have seen some spool holders that essentially will fit on here, and they enclose this single spool, so you can, keep some of the moisture out of the spool, and you can put some desiccant in there. That's fine, but it's if you look right behind me here, I know it's not going to really focus, but I have an iBoss Cyclops filament dryer back there, and it feeds the filament directly to the printers. So I'm able to keep my filament in that dry box. It also will dry out the filament. I can just turn it on, run it through a cycle, keep my filament dry. So again, I knew what I was getting. I can't complain that this isn't designed like that. But I've seen some people have put like the entire AMS into a tote, and then you can put in there. But again, just no easy way to keep your filament dry, so you'll have to get creative on that. Now, the next con that I'd like to talk about has also to do with the AMS. Now, I could be wrong. Somebody made a comment in my earlier video, and so I'm going to have to investigate this further, so take this one with a grain of salt. I do believe that the AMS needs to retract the filament. There are motors in the hub, so you'll actually see this spinning backward. So when it cuts the filament, then it actually pulls it back a little bit. And so if you were to put a spool on that was almost out of filament and it ran out and to the point where the filament was no longer attached to the hub, when it does that retraction, it's not going to be able to pull the filament out, and you may end up with an error. Now, like I said, I haven't seen this yet. I haven't run a multicolor print and run out of filament, so it's just something to be aware of. The other user mentioned that it was great for using up old spools because you can actually have it run out of one color, and then if you have another of the same on there, you can program that and it will just fail over and continue to do that. Now, I do believe that is a feature that I have heard before, where if you were, let's say I was using this in my production run for my products, if I had all 4 of these loaded with black PETG and I ran out of one spool, it would just continue with the next spool. So that is kind of a pro and a con, I guess. The final one that I will list has to do with the Handy app. So my very first print with this printer, Bambu includes this little blade and the screws in the little accessory kit that they give you. This box I printed, they don't give you the box, but in the little cardboard box, they give you this blade and screws. I went on the Handy app, I found the Bambu Lab scraper here, and from my phone, chose it, picked everything, thought I had it set up. I go to hit print, and it goes through its warm-up cycle, and it actually starts printing, starting over here on the side, running right off the bed, So obviously it was not going to print well. I don't know why it did that. So my point being is when you have something that somebody else has created and sliced and you're just sending it to the printer, your mileage may vary. I tried it again and I'm not sure if it was the filament that I was using or what, but I got this mess here. It just, it did a semi-okay first layer, and then when it went to the second layer, it was peeling up the first layer, so I stopped that print. Other than things where I've really been trying to push the printer speed-wise, I haven't had any problems with my prints. So again, with that Handy app, you just have to be careful. I'd recommend finding, you can use the stuff that you find on MakerWorld, but if possible, take them to your computer, open them up in the Bambu slicer, see what's going on, make sure that your settings are good for the filament that you have so that you're working with known things. So that's my overall review of the Bambu A1 3D printer. I think it's great. I am super happy with my purchase. I am very happy that I bought not only this printer, but the AMS Lite. I'm going to be using this for a long time, and I think if you are in the market for a 3D printer, you can't go wrong with this one. Does it have all the fancy bells and whistles and, can it do everything? No, absolutely not. But at this price point, the features that you're getting, I think it's fantastic, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. So, as always, if you're enjoying what I'm doing here on the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that like button. Let me know that you enjoy it. And then if you hit that little bell, you'll know when I post new videos. So, as always, I hope we can continue to learn, whether it's 3D printers, lasers, CNC, whatever it is. I'm Rick from Directed Tech. Have a great day.